Shadow Attendant, take a look at what these are all about. A bunch of entry-level knowledge balls, am I a garbage dump? David scolded the Shadow Attendant floating beside him. The Shadow Attendant's face turned red, showing the owner that he was working very hard. The boundless starry sky, the attendants of gods, the collision of civilizations, invincible warships, terrifying Zergs, extraordinary lives, humble mortals, ushering in a new era. I have completed the 5.18 million word version of Abel the Witcher, which has been continuously updated for 667 days. Keywords of the novel. Extraordinary David without pop-ups. Download the complete collection of Extraordinary David TXT, and read the latest chapters of Extraordinary David. Chapter 1. Freshmen. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Freshmen. On the morning of December 23, 20412 in the Gregorian calendar, a rock star with half gray land and half blue ocean was illuminated by the star Kia, and the atmosphere surrounding the planet changed in various colors. Even when looking at land from space, one can see the devastation on the land. Many years of fighting have left too many traces here, with little green coverage on the land and mostly a dull gray. Only by seeing the blue ocean can it indicate that this is a planet with the most basic resource of life, water. Although the ever-changing colors of the planet Pancher seem like a dream from a distance, in fact, this planet is only a low-quality administrative planet in the Interstellar Federation. A low-quality of life administrative planet is the lowest standard among all human habitable planets, providing necessary conditions for human survival such as oxygen, fresh water, and food. However, a low quality of life indicates a harsh environment, making it difficult for humans to survive in the wild. In a sky on the planet Pancher, the previously calm and sunny sky was shattered by the sharp sound of a sonic boom. Then dazzling light spots appeared in the air, and as they drew closer, there were several aircraft chasing after them. At the forefront is a silver-colored personal flying shuttle, followed closely by 4 interceptor drones from the Planet Defense Skynet system. In the single-person flying shuttle, Abbott controlled the shuttle with a gloomy expression, and the pilot kept moving left and right in his hand, greatly changing direction, which was already the limit of this individual flying shuttle. He all had a feeling that if he made such a significant change in direction, the personal flying shuttle used for space flight would likely collapse without the need for interceptor drone attacks, but he dared not hesitate at all, and the acceleration and change in direction in his hand remained uninterrupted. He wanted to get rid of the interceptor drone behind him by accelerating and changing direction, but the 4 interceptor drones were like sticking to a personal flying shuttle, unable to get rid of it at all. Damn it, I shouldn't have driven this damn thing here. Albert cursed. Albert is an interstellar mercenary belonging to the infamous Sirius mercenary group and also a wanted felon in the Interstellar Federation, carrying multiple counts of murder, multiple refusals, assault, robbery, and other serious crimes. Dozens of civilians died in his hands. In the previous mission, the Sirius Mercenary Corps successfully robbed an interstellar cruise ship, and the mercenaries received generous rewards, each seeking their own fun. Albert also gained a lot of credit points, so he used his fake identity to come to Rockstar to relax. He thought there shouldn't be any problems on this remote planet, so he didn't bring any weapons or equipment, just secretly infiltrated by piloting a personal flying shuttle. This kind of infiltration is something that interstellar wanted criminals often do, and even simulated identity bracelets cannot withstand formal level scrutiny. Forged identity bracelets can only support simple credit point consumption. What he didn't expect was that he was discovered by the interceptor drone just as he entered the planet. These garbage don't care about the Zerg, what are you chasing me for? Abbott continued cursing as he looked at the interceptor drone on the central control screen. These interceptor drones are part of the planet's Skynet defense, primarily designed to detect and attack airborne Zergs, rather than targeting infiltrators. If a powerful Zerg is detected, the interceptor drone will report to Skynet and monitor it. If it is only a weak Zerg, it will directly launch an attack. Albert was also unlucky, as he happened to encounter a team of interceptor drones on a mission and was targeted. If equipped with weapons, these 4 interceptor drones would not be seen by him, but flying a personal shuttle makes it difficult to even escape. Warning, stop flying immediately, accept inspection. Warning, stop flying immediately, accept inspection. This is a warning issued by the staff of the Skynet monitoring interceptor drone. Although the interceptor drone is unmanned, there will always be relevant personnel conducting real-time monitoring at the far end of Skynet. At this point, Abbott's situation has been reported and the attack will be launched at any time. Fortunately, the target set by the interceptor drone is the Zerg, otherwise there would be no warning and they would attack directly. Albert ignored the warning of the interceptor drone, as he had seen too many of them and had a detailed understanding of their performance. Although he cannot escape the pursuit of the interceptor drone at this moment, usually the interceptor drone only makes an emergency landing of an illegal aircraft and does not directly attack. The command to launch attacks on humans can only be issued by humans with corresponding permissions. This is an iron rule and the ultimate solution to countless artificial intelligence problems. Albert saw the map next to the personal shuttle pilot and found Perrin City not far ahead. He was overjoyed that as long as he approached the city, the interceptor drone could no longer pursue him. The interceptor drone must prioritize protecting the lives of citizens. The personal flying shuttle accelerated towards the direction of Perrin City, while the 4 interceptor drones in the rear continuously issued warnings and activated high-power scanners to scan the personal flying shuttle. "David, didn't you have breakfast? Walk faster." Jessica, with her short brown hair, urged David, who had fallen behind. Although Jessica is not particularly beautiful, her 17-year-old age gives her a youthful aura unique to her youth. David can tell from her attitude towards herself that she is not too willing to call her colleagues. Jessica also understood in her heart that if it weren't for the fact that she couldn't find anyone to go with on a winter break morning, she wouldn't have called someone as solitary as David. "Okay," David said in a short voice. When he said the word "good," he had an indescribable strange feeling in his heart because he instinctively used this language, but he was extremely unfamiliar with it. This situation occurred because he only came to this world yesterday and did not receive the memory of this body. Fortunately, he inexplicably received the language and words that this body possesses. His name in his previous life was David Lee, a successful IT engineer. The reason why he added quotes to success was because he was just an IT elite in a 4th-tier city. In a 1st and 2nd-tier city, he was like a scumbag. The place where he was hit was on a downhill road called Fan Gong Bridge. He neither drove his small displacement car nor rode the electric scooter with a depleted battery, but walked instead. When the heavy truck lost control and rushed towards him, he was on the sidewalk with several passers-by. Heavy trucks did not choose heavier cement tankers on the road, but instead rushed towards more vulnerable populations. David did not want to speculate on the thoughts of the heavy truck driver with the utmost malice, but now he is extremely skeptical about it. When facing a runaway heavy truck, David was surrounded by pedestrians, especially a few students who had just finished school. At that time, he didn't have time to think, and with pedestrians on both sides, he couldn't avoid it at all. He made an action that he couldn't even imagine at the moment, and suddenly pushed away the pedestrians beside him. Then came the heavy impact. He didn't know how many people died, but he remembered clearly that he successfully pushed away a few students around him. When David woke up, he appeared in the home of this body, in an extremely eerie basement, occupying the body at the same time. The damaged altar, charred unknown chunks of flesh, opened ancient and unfamiliar texts, coupled with his naked body, is the scene of an evil ritual. If it weren't for the entire lighting on the top of the basement, the high-tech fitness equipment in the basement, and the metal walls of the basement, he would have thought he had entered a world of ignorance and barbarism. It took David almost an hour to slowly accept the fact that he had transformed from a yellow person to a tall, white boy today. It took another hour to find the way out of the basement. Although it was just a simple palm verification, for him who had not received any memory of this body, everything needed to be tried. However, after leaving the basement, he no longer had to worry about the unfamiliarity of the environment. Because of the intelligent butler in this residence, a humanoid housekeeping robot is waiting outside the basement where David is located. David was surprised to see a huge underground vegetable cultivation base outside the basement, and then, led by the intelligent butler, returned to his bedroom on the ground. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. History. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 History. Due to an accident on his body, David tossed and turned last night and couldn't fall asleep. Just as he finally fell asleep, he was awakened by the identity bracelet on his wrist. The smart butler also entered to remind him that Jessica was already waiting for him at the door. According to the reminder from the smart butler, David realized that it was his agreement with Jessica to participate in the signing event for the new book War and Love by renowned author Burgess. He originally intended to push Jessica out of the signing event, but upon hearing that the destination mentioned by the smart butler was a paper bookstore, he immediately decided to go there. The unknown world and the lost memory of this body made him eager to obtain more information, but he was not even clear about the way to search for information in this world. However, a paper bookstore became his best choice. Along the way with Jessica, he also noticed that her attitude towards him was not as good as his friends, and in his constant silence, Jessica's attitude became even worse. After agreeing, David quickly took a few steps and arrived at Jessica's side, his gaze fixed on everything around him. The cars floating on the ground on the road, the entire city completely covered by stones, even the houses are built like fortresses, without even a window. This strange design gives him a feeling of extreme insecurity in this world. The bookstore they went to was not far, so they did not take any transportation. After walking about 3 kilometers, at the corner of the street where David lived, David saw groups of people standing in front of the bookstore. David looked behind him with some unease. There was nothing behind him, but in fact, there was a strange semi-transparent shadow hidden. This was what he discovered when he woke up in the basement, and when he first discovered this translucent shadow, he almost scared him to death. After multiple experiments, he found that this strange semi-transparent shadow was completely following him and could move according to his commands. Although the only ability that this translucent shadow has shown up to now is invisibility, with no other abilities, it has also dispelled his sense of loneliness when he first came to this world. David had already tested Jessica and couldn't detect any invisible semi-transparent shadows, but with nearly 100 people ahead, he was still worried that anyone would notice it. "We're late, it seems we'll have to queue up for a long time," Jessica said with some dissatisfaction. She got up at 7 o'clock for this signing party, but it's only before 8 o'clock. You should know that it's currently on vacation, and she sleeps until at least 9 o'clock every day. David smiled and remained silent. He didn't care about the signing, he wanted to enter the bookstore and find the books he was interested in. "Don't crowd, today's signing event will only open in an hour, and Mr. Burgess will be arriving in a while. Please queue up and wait," the bookstore clerk shouted loudly, trying to maintain order. "Jessica, I'll go inside and read a book, so I won't be with you," David said to Jessica. "Go, go." Jessica waved her hand, and now she had found a few acquaintances who no longer needed David's company. Although these acquaintances were not friends, compared to the boring David, she would rather choose those who were not very familiar. David felt that Jessica treated him with a kind of attitude towards the spare tire, and it seemed that his predecessor should have been Jessica's admirer, which was why Jessica had such an attitude. But all of this has nothing to do with him now. He walked into the bookstore from the scattered queue. Although there are more convenient e-books, it does not affect the sales of paper books, as can be seen from the scale of this bookstore. The salesperson glanced at him and realized that he didn't want to cut in line, so he ignored him. There are over 10 large electronic posters in the bookstore, most of which display promotional posters for War and Love. The glass wall of the bookstore has good sound insulation, and at least the sound of nearly 100 people outside has not been transmitted into the bookstore, making it appear very quiet and the best reading environment. David walked through bookshelves, which were divided into categories such as philosophy, politics, law, military, economics, culture, education, sports, language and writing, art, history, geography, etc., for the convenience of readers to choose from. David walked to the history section and found a book called The History of the Interstellar Federation. After picking up the book, he went to a nearby seat and opened it to read. Apart from him, there was no one else in the bookstore. Those who could come to this paper bookstore at this time were all to participate in the signing event for the famous author Burgess's new book, War and Love. However, the signing event is held at the entrance of the bookstore, which is why there is such a quiet environment. He opened The History of the Interstellar Federation and saw a sentence on the title page. Survival or destruction, the world is on the edge of a cliff. Marshall Denton of the Federation. Thinking about the meaning of this sentence in his mind, David opened the content page of The History of the Interstellar Federation and then saw the history of this world, a magnificent history with iron and blood. In the year 10116 of the lunar calendar, a severe spatial oscillation occurred on the outer side of the 16th spiral arm on the edge of the Interstellar Federation. This space oscillation caused an unknown shift in space, overlapping a corner of two universes, namely the Interstellar Federation universe and the Divine Universe. The overlap between the Interstellar Federation and the Divine Universe is the 16-spin arm 82 planet. Before the two universes overlapped, 16-spin arm 82 was just an unknown ordinary resource star. The environment there is harsh, and humans cannot survive there at all. But after the overlap of two large universes, the 16th spiral arm planet 82 underwent wonderful changes, with changes in the content of oxygen and various other gases in the atmosphere, becoming a habitable planet. At the same time, a large amount of krypton crystals were discovered underground on the planet's 16 spinning arms 82. Kryptonite is the main energy of the Interstellar Federation, and it is the existence of kryptonite that allows the Interstellar Federation to explore the universe and dominate the entire Interstellar Federation universe. But kryptonite is also the fundamental energy source of the Divine Universe. When the two universes overlapped, both sides preparing to start negotiations discovered kryptonite on the planet's 16 spinal arms 82. In the nearly 100-year period from 10116 to 10,200, the two universes engaged in a great war related to the survival of races on the planet's 16 spinal arms 82. That great war was only briefly mentioned in the chronicles of the Interstellar Federation, but during that century, the planet's 16 spinal arms 82 was renamed Warstar, and one can imagine the brutality of that war back then. In the autumn of 10,200, in the unstable space above the Star of War, giant insects appeared one after another. These insects appeared from space and landed on the Star of War. Then came countless insects, ranging in height from humans to tens of meters, rushing out of the giant insect's body, crazily attacking everything that could be seen. The situation changed in 10200, and neither the Interstellar Federation or the Divine Universe could resist these powerful insects alone. Both sides also discovered that insects can grow by devouring various substances, including human corpses, wreckage of interstellar warships, buildings on the ground, and everything they can see is their food. Especially the kryptonite mine stimulates them, and every time the insects occupy a kryptonite mine, there will be a quantitative explosion. In 10202, the Federation of Zhou and the Divine Universe signed an alliance contract, and from then on, the two universes jointly opened up a defense line on the Warstar to resist insect invasion. And these insects are also known as the Zerg, a species that cannot communicate and is predatory and aggressive. In the following 10,000 years, Warstar became a strong defense line between the two universes, with countless Interstellar Federation warriors and Divine World warriors fighting fiercely. Of course, the Zerg also attack neighboring planets of the two universes through various means. Although the two universes continue to intercept, there are still some Zerg that pass through defense and enter nearby planets. Due to the inability of the Zerg to enter other planets on a large scale, they are unable to truly form a numerical advantage, and nearby planets have not formed a large-scale Zerg population due to the centralized cleaning of the Interstellar Federation and the Divine World. But this does not mean that the threat of the Zerg has disappeared on these planets. The Zerg larvae are extremely difficult to detect and can hide deep underground, making it impossible for scanning devices to detect them. At the appropriate time, these larvae can grow into various forms based on the surrounding environment and attack life on the planet. This endless war has caused a great headache for the Interstellar Federation, with more interstellar warships being built and more defenses appearing in the universe to ensure that distant planets are not affected by the Zerg. End of this chapter. 3. Chapter 3 Explosion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Explosion. Just as David was quietly reading the history of the world in the book, he suddenly felt a palpitations. He turned his gaze to the semi-transparent shadow hidden beside him, because the feeling of palpitations was transmitted to him by the semi-transparent shadow. Inexplicably, he knew the meaning that the semi-transparent shadow wanted to convey to him. It was dangerous, extremely dangerous. He had this feeling in his past life when he saw a runaway truck, the despair and helplessness, the fear of life being mercilessly deprived, and at this moment, David's hair stood up all over his body. Albert, who was piloting a personal flying shuttle at lightning speed in the sky, had already set the shuttle at its highest speed. This type of personal flying shuttle, which could fly short distances in the universe, was unable to fly at super-fast speeds in the atmosphere. However, he didn't need to use the map at this time, he just used the scanning device on his personal flying shuttle to clearly see the city of Perrin below. Quickly find the most crowded spot in Perrin City for me. Albert urgently ordered. The auxiliary intelligence on the personal flying shuttle quickly identified the location with the highest relative number of people outdoors through scanning results. The individual shuttle adjusted its direction slightly according to its position, and when he saw the scene of nearly 100 people gathering next to the building on the ground, Albert's face showed a victorious smile. On the other end of the Skynet, the chief official, Bifam, looked at the information sent back by the interceptor drone with a flicker of joy in his eyes. Based on the information sent back by the interceptor drone, especially when the arrogant Abbott did not have any makeup, Skynet analyzed Abbott's identity. In front of Colonel Bispham was Abbott's intelligence, along with a bunch of wanted notices, including those with huge bounties. As long as Abbott is caught or killed, it is a huge credit, and he is highly likely to surpass the ranks that most officers cannot, become a lieutenant colonel, and the wealth brought by the huge bounty. Of course, only a portion of the income from the huge bounty will be allocated to him, but this is already enough to make him excited. Execute the extermination. Major Bispham stabilized his emotions and ordered in a low voice. The 4 interceptor drones that received the command simultaneously activated small rapid-fire guns and chased towards the personal flying shuttle. Major, there are a large number of civilians below, shouted the staff who were monitoring as Major Bispham turned his head to look at Abbott's intelligence. The staff member was also very frustrated. Although he saw the city and the increasingly prominent crowd, this was an order issued by Major Bispham, and he had no right to cancel it. He could only inform Major Bispham to cancel the order. Just as Colonel Bispham was looking up, all 4 small rapid-fire guns from the interceptor drones hit Abbott's personal flying shuttle. The personal flying shuttle is only a civilian aircraft without any weapons or defense. If it is hit by 4 interceptor drones, it is completely a dead-end situation. Albert never expected that the blockers would ignore so many civilians and attack him like this until his death. Similar to Albert's mood, there was also Colonel Bispham who gave the order. Stop the attack immediately, he shouted at the command. It's just that the command was already late at this moment. If he hadn't just been distracted by the intelligence in his hand and fantasized about meritorious service, this tragedy could still have been avoided. Of course, if Albert didn't dive down, but instead used the speed of his personal flying shuttle to dodge in the air, perhaps he could persist for a longer time. But now it was too late, and in Albert's heart full of unwillingness, the personal flying shuttle was hit by several shells. As a thriving mercenary and wanted criminal, he had good combat abilities, but in such a situation, he couldn't even resist and was shot down. The wings and horizontal wings of the personal flying shuttle were shattered, and several holes appeared on the fuselage, 2 of which were in Albert's cockpit. 20 meters away from the ground, Abbott suffered a serious injury, his right leg completely disappeared or was a minor injury, and a penetrating large hole appeared in his abdomen, which was a fatal injury. If Albert had a conscience, with his driving skills, he could have tried to control the personal shuttle and reduce harm to the ground crowd. But before he died, he made an even crazier move. He used all his strength to direct the personal flying shuttle towards the most crowded area and rushed towards it. At the last moment, a cruel smile appeared on his face. At the same time, on the other side of Skynet, Major Bispham watched in horror as the personal flying shuttle crashed into the crowd, and then a flame shone, covering up the entire area. That's it. Major Bispham sat down on the chair behind him, with only this thought remaining in his heart. The extremely dangerous feeling emanating from the invisible semi-transparent shadow made David's hair stand on end. He instinctively looked towards the glass curtain wall of the door, and although he didn't notice anything, he followed the panic in his heart to find a place to hide. He didn't shout because he didn't know if the dangerous feeling was true or false. The only thing he could do was to immediately find a relatively safe place. Quickly, he saw the bathroom not far away, seemingly adhering to the special sturdy concept here. The door of the bathroom was also made of metal. David took 2 quick steps, pushed open the bathroom door, and walked in. Just as he entered the bathroom and closed the metal door, a violent impact and then an even more intense explosion sounded from outside the bookstore. Then he saw the metal door in front of him being pushed flat by a huge impact force, flying out horizontally towards the bathroom with his body. At the moment the metal door flew out, David's body was tightly pressed against it, instinctively holding his head with both hands to reduce damage to the head. He doesn't want to be hit and killed again when he just crossed over and didn't understand the world yet. The strong muscles came into play at this moment, and his body was pushed flat by the metal door. When it collided with the partition in the bathroom, these muscles protected him. Although the wooden bathroom partition was damaged twice in a row, surprisingly, his body did not suffer much damage. At least he only felt the skin behind him was injured, and there were no signs of injuries to his hands, feet, or head. The flame shock wave caused by the explosion was also blocked by the metal door in front of him, and the most serious thing was that he pressed his unprotected hand on the metal door, resulting in a slight burn. He was prepared in advance, allowing him to close his breath in time under the impact of the flames, so that his internal body did not burn as a result, but his hair and sweat were burned off. At this moment, David couldn't care about these anymore. Even if the metal door was hot, he didn't dare to let go. The sound of gravel hitting the metal kept coming from the metal door. Fortunately, this is the bathroom. With the recent impact, many water pipes burst, forming a mist in the bathroom and reducing the heat in the air. The temperature of the metal door quickly dropped. David's immediate choice was right. Apart from the explosion shock wave breaking through the metal doors and some walls, the entire bathroom remained largely intact, which is why he was able to maintain minor injuries during the explosion. The personal flying shuttle is a short-range spacecraft that uses krypton crystals as its energy source, which is extremely stable and energy-intensive. Due to the fact that such an impact could not trigger an explosion of krypton crystals, the explosion of this impact was mainly caused by a small amount of backup energy on a personal flying shuttle. Fortunately, this is the case. Otherwise, with Abbott as the personal flying shuttle, there would be no life within a kilometer if there were an explosion with sufficient energy to replace the krypton crystal. David waited for a while longer, and the sense of danger completely disappeared. He shook his dizzy head and casually pushed open the metal door pressed against him. At this moment, he realized that the strength of this body was far beyond his imagination. This metal door weighed 100 kilograms, but he didn't feel how heavy it was. However, he did not have time to study his own body, and the semi-transparent shadow that was invisible in his perception was actively leaving his side and flying towards the outside. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Tragedy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Tragedy. The explosion just now did not cause any damage to the translucent shadow, and all the debris and splashes directly passed through the translucent shadow. David wanted to command the semi-transparent shadow to come back, but he felt a sense of satisfaction coming from the semi-transparent shadow, as if he had eaten something full. Outside of his sight, the semi-transparent shadow was stopping at a distance of 10 meters away from him, which was the maximum distance that the semi-transparent shadow could leave him. This location also happens to be the entrance of the bookstore that has completely disappeared, with invisible nothingness attracted by the semi-transparent shadow, flying towards it and entering its body. If anyone counts, they can find that the quantity of these void substances is exactly the number of deaths. David felt that his connection with the semi-transparent shadow was becoming increasingly close. If he had previously used a 2G network on his phone to connect to the semi-transparent shadow, it would now be like using a 3G network connection, and he felt that way now. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew that the semi-transparent shadow was not a problem. Instead, it seemed like he had gained some benefits, so he didn't bother with the semi-transparent shadow. At the end of the day, the time he received the translucent shadow was too short, so short that he did not have the ability to truly understand the translucent shadow. David tried to stand up, but the injury behind him was a bit painful, but it didn't have a big impact. He walked towards the bathroom door, which had lost its metal door. Stepping on the accumulated water on the ground, he walked cautiously as the ground was littered with debris from the explosion. Suddenly, he stopped because he saw a metal cylindrical object that was thick and thin enough to be held by one hand. It was about 20 centimeters long and had a black, glass-like mirror-like interior that sealed both ends of the metal cylinder. In this chaotic environment, this metal cylinder is extremely clean, so clean that people have to focus their attention on it. Even though David was ignorant of the world, he knew it was not an ordinary item. He bent down and picked it up. He didn't have the intention of owning this metal cylinder, but rather thought that he couldn't just leave it here. Of course, there was also a curious element in it. He put the metal cylinder into his pocket and walked out of the bathroom. Compared to the interior of the bathroom, the damage in the bookstore lobby was even more severe. The entire bookstore was filled with choking smoke, and the transparent glass wall and door outside the bookstore had disappeared. Large areas of red blood clots, as well as intact or damaged human bodies, were scattered inside and outside the store. When a personal flying shuttle collides with a crowd, the crowd cannot avoid it in time due to the speed of the personal flying shuttle and the crowding around it. The personal flying shuttle disintegrated in the end, and then its backup energy exploded, leaving almost no survivors in this area. David had a nauseous feeling of wanting to vomit. He was well aware that there were nearly 100 people gathering outside the bookstore, but at that time there were only a dozen or so complete corpses, the most of which were visible metal fragments and bloody fragments everywhere. His brain was blank, but he was soon awakened by the mournful moans. David was about to step forward to help the struggling person who was lying on the ground, but he heard the sound of police sirens coming from the air. Then he saw 2 blue and white police patrol flying vehicles approaching. He couldn't help but stop. It was better for a professional to handle this injury. Since the rescue came, there was no need for him to intervene. The blue and white police patrol ship hovered on the road in front of the bookstore, and more than 10 uniformed police officers jumped off it. All the police were stunned by the sight in front of them, and immediately became busy amidst various cheers. David, the only one who was able to stand completely on the scene, received special attention as police approached him. "Are you okay?" a middle-aged police officer asked David while using his instrument to check David's identity bracelet. David shook his head, but he didn't speak because he saw Jessica's body. The girl who was traveling together in the morning collapsed in a pool of blood, and a metal fragment from a personal flying shuttle penetrated her heart. I am Officer Bob, and the medical staff will be here soon. They will take care of your injury. Middle-aged Officer Bob looked at the instrument in his hand and knew that it was still a student. Seeing David's expression again, he couldn't help but pat David to express comfort. David doesn't have Jessica's memory, but he knows that Jessica and her predecessor are at least friends, otherwise they wouldn't have come to the bookstore together. He couldn't say how he felt about Jessica's death in his heart, neither sadness nor sadness. At this moment, what he felt most was fear, an extreme fear. If he didn't perceive danger from the semi-transparent shadow, then there would be him among the corpses lying on the ground. He nodded to Officer Bob in confusion, but his gaze remained fixed on Jessica's body. The second batch arrived with white rescue aircraft, and the city's emergency response was so fast that David was amazed. The explosion here occurred only 3 minutes ago, and the police and medical staff had already arrived. This did not make David happy in his heart, as it further illustrates the danger here. It is precisely because of the frequent occurrence of danger that the police and medical staff have such a quick responsibility. He thought of the buildings without windows and the cities he saw. Beauty is not important, but strength is the most important. A medical staff member treated the wound on his back and also applied some medicine to the burn on his hand. After being confirmed by medical staff that there were no major health issues, David did not board an ambulance to go to the hospital. Part of the reason is that he wants to go home immediately, which is relatively the safest place he feels. Another reason is that the injured people transported to the ambulance are seriously injured, and those who can scream are in better condition. Knowing that his body was not in any serious condition, he did not want to experience this tragedy again. I left the contact information of David's identity bracelet on his wrist with Officer Bob, so that the police can contact him in the future. He can leave the scene and the bookstore. When he left the bookstore, he felt a semi-transparent shadow following closely behind him, and none of the police could detect it. At a distance of 3 kilometers, David ran quickly all the way back home, completely ignoring the way pedestrians looked at him in embarrassment. As soon as he entered the house, he immediately slammed the door tightly shut, and then leaned against it. Although he has died once, today's danger still frightened him quite a bit. He sat weakly on the ground, feeling a deep sense of fear as he traveled from a peaceful world to an unfamiliar and dangerous one. The novelty of entering this world was shattered by sudden danger, especially when Jessica, whom he knew, died tragically in front of him. This feeling was something he had never experienced in his previous life. At this moment, he most hoped for someone to comfort him, but with the memories he had not yet recovered, he had no idea who to confide in, let alone the fact that his travels were his biggest secret and he couldn't share it with anyone. He thought of a semi-transparent shadow. Just as he was thinking, the semi-transparent shadow received his thoughts and emerged from invisibility, sitting beside him. Looking at the semi-transparent shadow beside him, he couldn't help but feel a moment of peace of mind. In the most dangerous moment, the semi-transparent shadow saved him. Thinking about last night when he saw a semi-transparent shadow, he was initially startled, but later realized that it was not dangerous, and even treated it as a passing golden finger, making various ridiculous ways to activate the golden finger. Now David's heart was filled with gratitude, as if he were treating friends, reaching out to pat the translucent shadow. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Memory. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Memory. Just as David's hand tapped on the semi-transparent shoulder of the shadow, a strange energy came from his hand and entered his body. He felt like being immersed in warm water, unable to help but relax his whole body, slowly entering sleep with residual fear. David fell asleep on the floor of the living room door, but fortunately, there was only smart butler Emma in the entire house, and smart butler Emma wouldn't bother with the owner's behavior. David had a dream where he grew up with his mother, from elementary school to middle school, and then to high school. In the dream, he had a somewhat autistic personality and had few friends besides his mother. The father's figure rarely appeared until one day when he separated from his mother. Shortly after arranging everything, his mother committed suicide. In his dreams, he had memories of a beautiful life, as well as sadness of losing loved ones. He laughed and cried bitterly. This is a complete life from birth to the age of 17, including all experiences and emotions, all presented in this dream. David was awakened from hunger. He opened his eyes and first felt the differences around him. In his eyes, all the colors are extremely vivid, just as he used to use a regular TV resolution to see the world, but now he uses a 4K TV resolution to see the world. He didn't know what the reason was, but he knew it was due to the energy transmitted to him by the translucent shadow. He looked at the identity bracelet, which looked like a watch on his wrist. It was already 9 p.m., which means he had been sleeping on the floor all day. Recalling everything in his dream and comparing it with the memories he had already recalled before, he was very clear in his heart that he had regained all the memories of his predecessor. The former owner of this body was also named David, which made him wonder if it was a choice of time travel or just a coincidence. David Kerr, a 17-year-old senior student, is currently on winter vacation. He lives alone in this building, but he is not an orphan. His biological father has formed a separate family, and he has inherited the inheritance of his biological mother Kathy to live alone. David couldn't describe the emotions he had for his biological father in his memory at this moment, which included respect, resentment, resistance, and various emotional entanglements. His biological father's name is Hans Kerr, and he is a hero in this city. Not only in this city, he holds the title of National Warrior, but also has a special identity. Usher is the highest level title among all battle heroes, and it is also the origin of David's respect for Hans. Hans has put in too much effort to obtain the title of National Warrior, including being separated from David's mother, whose mother committed suicide due to depression, including Hans's own loss of left arm and leg, which can only rely on prosthetics for mobility. Although his body has undergone gene therapy, it has always been in a weak state, including his son David's unforgivable behavior. David's predecessor had always been deeply concerned about his mother's death, and Hans remarried and had a son, which led to his separation from Hans. Of course, legally speaking, Hans was still his guardian. He also knew that the planet he was on was called the Rock Planet, 2 small galaxies away from the Zergs' battlefield star. Within the influence of the Zerg, it was the least influential battlefield planet. Although this is said, it is not safe on the rocky planet, and uncontrollable Zerg larvae are scattered everywhere. From time to time, some Zerg larvae will grow into first-level Zerg, and even more covert Zerg may even grow into second-level Zerg. Zerg larvae can be dealt with using ordinary thermal weapons, but once they become a first-level Zerg, they are not something that ordinary people can deal with. The only way to deal with a level 1 Zerg is to wear exoskeleton armor and hold a weapon made of level 1 Zerg teeth and claws, combined with several types of metal to break through their defense. Of course, this is only a relative situation. With the flexibility and combat ability of the Zerg, they usually have to deal with a level 1 Zerg. Without multiple strong individuals wearing exoskeleton armor and holding level 1 weapons, they cannot defeat them. To be able to wear exoskeleton armor, the primary requirement is to become a certified warrior. During the thousands of years of fighting against the Zergs, the Interstellar Federation used advanced war machines to confront them and also utilize them to strengthen their own combat capabilities. The body of the Zerg is the most important resource among them. As mentioned earlier, the teeth and claws of the Zerg, these sharpest bones, will become the raw materials for making stronger weapons. Most Zerg corpses have 2 slender muscles on the back, known as strengthening flesh, which is the foundation for the Interstellar Federation to have powerful warriors. David also knew why his predecessor offered sacrifices, because he wanted to attend Naan University, but his own conditions were not met, so he thought of taking a shortcut. The city of Naan, where Naan University is located, is the largest city on the planet Panchur and the economic and cultural center of Panchur. It is also guarded by a strong military, making the area within 100 kilometers of Naan a free living area for humans. This is extremely desirable for people like David's predecessor who lived in the city of Paran. As long as they leave the city, there may be danger, and even Zergs may occasionally appear inside the city. Although the opportunities for the emergence of Zergs within the city are limited, it has also caused David's predecessor to lack the corresponding sense of security in Paran city. Although Naan city is good, it is not easy to go there to live, so one needs to have the corresponding permissions. In the Interstellar Federation, one cannot travel to other cities without reaching a certain level of permission. David's predecessor was still a minor, not to mention having some level of authority. His guardian is his father Hans, and if Hans takes him with him, as Hans's national soldier, he can freely go to any city and any planet. David's predecessor was very resistant to Hans and did not want to beg him. He only wanted to leave Paran city as soon as possible and leave Hans's side. Paran city was filled with sad memories of David's predecessor. The only way he could come up with a way to leave Hans was to get into a university. He didn't want to be an ordinary office worker in this city for the rest of his life, and even when traveling, he had to apply first and wait for approval. Only Naan University on the Rock Star was the school he most hoped to go to. The students trained by Naan University are the talents that all units compete for. As long as they enter Naan University, they are equivalent to having a stable high salary, high social authority, and becoming residents of Naan City has become inevitable. Naan City warmly welcomes graduates from Naan University, almost always agreeing to their decision to stay in Naan City as long as they apply. David's predecessor's learning ability can only be considered average, and his academic performance in various subjects at the current Panchur High School is only above average level. Not to mention Naan University, even second-rate universities are difficult to enter with such grades. So there is no hope for him to be admitted to Naan University based on his academic performance, and he can only consider using his combat talent to enter Naan University. Besides cultivating a large number of civil servants, Naan University is also the best first-class school on Panchur Star. With the standard of living of David's predecessor, Little Rich, he received daily fortified meat supplements from Zerg larvae. His body was much stronger than that of ordinary students, but it was all the fresh students from the entire planet of Azuki who had to be admitted to Ainin University, and many of them had better conditions than him. In fact, with his current strength of 600 kilograms, even among his peers at Paran High School, he can only rank in the top 30. End of this chapter. 6. Chapter 6 Discoveries. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Discoveries. In order to be able to attend his desired Naan University, David applied for a tutoring class and worked hard to exercise. However, the registration foundation for Naan University was 800 kilograms of strength, and with the requirement of speed, he couldn't meet both of these requirements, let alone other exam items. Just when he was in a difficult situation, his predecessor saw an original book from the Divine World, which was fighting against the Zerg with the Interstellar Federation, at the trainer of the tutoring class, Jeremy. Jeremy's trainer treated this book as a collectible and placed it in the display cabinet, but accidentally mentioned to David's predecessor that it was a sacrificial manual belonging to the Divine World. At that time, David's predecessor, who was anxious about not being able to improve his strength, saw hope in this sacrificial manual. In the eyes of the people of the Interstellar Federation, the Divine World is a mysterious and powerful world. When the Interstellar Federation and the Zerg engage on the ground, they rely on a sea of people tactic, with a large number of exoskeleton armored warriors fighting against the first-level Zerg. A more powerful Zerg requires the Interstellar Federation to use stronger weapons and equipment, as well as more warships. Unlike the Divine World, the warriors sent by the Divine World possess terrifying combat abilities and can almost fight against level 2 or even level 3 Zergs on their own. Even the stronger ones have the ability to fight against level 4 Zergs alone. What is the concept of a level 4 Zerg? It is an existence that requires several interstellar warships to fight against, and each one that appears can easily destroy a city. So all news from the Interstellar Federation world to the Divine world is under lockdown, and of course, this lockdown cannot be completely blocked. Many rumors are circulating through various channels. A sacrificial manual from the Divine world is highly likely to bring strong hope to David's predecessor. So David's predecessor took out 50,000 credit points and purchased the sacrificial manual of the Divine world, which he saw in the basement when he came to this world. After receiving the sacrificial manual, David's predecessor began translation work, translating the Divine world script into Federal script. Among them, David's predecessor also used Hansa's National Scholar authority to borrow relevant books. It should be noted that all information related to the Divine world is not something that a student like David's predecessor could borrow, but Hans, who possesses the status of a National Scholar, is different. The status of a National Scholar is extremely prestigious and has great authority. If it weren't for Hansa's own weak abilities, he could have achieved extremely high political status with his status as a National Scholar. And unlike now, Hans is just the deputy director of the Perrin City Department of Justice, and he is still in a state of retirement with little power in his hands. After many days of translation, David's predecessor's confidence grew stronger because according to records, sacrificing could summon the divine attendant Shadow Attendant, who could become his best combat assistant. The Shadow Attendant ability described in the Sacrifice Handbook can be transformed into the strongest armor to provide defense for the owner, and can also cooperate with the owner to attack enemies, making it the most reliable helper for the owner. During the process of offering sacrifices, the body of David's predecessor will also be strengthened, which is the benefit that David's predecessor hopes to receive the most. Although the Shadow Attendant is good, it can only serve as a support for the future and has little effect on getting into non-university. But the reinforcement during the sacrificial process, just think of it as the reinforcement of the Divine world, and its effect must be extremely powerful. Therefore, David's predecessor began to crazily purchase sacrificial-related materials. David recalled the process of discovering the sacrificial manual of the Divine world at this moment, and with 2 lifetimes of memory, he discovered the problem from the perspective of an observer. The first consequence is the sacrifice, and the reason David possessed this body was due to the accidental death of his predecessor. From the situation in the underground gym at that time, it goes without saying that the cause of death was the consequences of the failed sacrifice, and Jeremy's trainer did not even mention that the sacrifice would fail. If the sacrificial manual is really so easy to succeed, how could that Jeremy trainer display such a sacrificial manual with the effects described in the book as a collectible? Secondly, there is the way in which the sacrificial manual appears. Jeremy's trainer is aware of the condition of David's predecessor, and it was during his most urgent period that the sacrificial manual appeared. There were no peculiarities in this, and David did not believe it. From David's bystander's perspective, the Jeremy trainer is clearly selling the sacrificial manual forward. My predecessor was a senior high school student who was unaware of the dangers associated with offering manuals from the Divine world. But don't trainers Jeremy know? David couldn't help feeling a chill at this moment. It seemed that his predecessor's death was likely not an accident, but a premeditated one. He just doesn't know if Jeremy's trainer is for money or just for his life. When it comes to money, most of the nearly 300,000 credit points were obtained through Jeremy's trainer's help in finding relevant materials. You should know that many of these materials are unheard of by their predecessors, not to mention where they were purchased. The most suspicious thing for David is that heart, a first-level Zerg heart. Although the first-level Zerg are full of treasures, they only refer to their shells, teeth, claws, and reinforced flesh. The rest are useless and will not be brought back. Sometimes even relatively cheap shells are discarded, who would bring back the heart of the first-level Zerg. In fact, the most crucial aspect of launching a sacrifice is the heart of this first-level Zerg, which was also the direct culprit of its predecessor's death. The more David thought about it, the more afraid he became in his heart. Although his body had a huge strength of 600 kilograms, the strength of Jeremy's trainer far exceeded him. He even doubted whether Jeremy's trainer was a formal top scorer. In memory, during the training process, Jeremy's trainer was able to easily block his strength, appearing effortless. Call the police. David, who had come from a previous life, had this as his first thought, but soon he gave up. Firstly, he doesn't have any evidence. Should he tell the police that Jeremy Trainer killed him with a book? In fact, David is not dead, he is still alive and well, which cannot be explained clearly. Secondly, the method of sacrifice can be obtained from the sacrificial manual of the divine world. Based on the blockade imposed by the Star Federation on the divine world, such behavior is likely to be punished and may not necessarily affect Jeremy's trainer. David stabilized his mind and began to assess the current situation. From the perspective of Jeremy's trainer's planning, it is likely that the other party will not directly attack him. If we could kill him directly, how could we use such covert means to act? If the last sacrifice failed and Jeremy's trainer could succeed, based on the situation in the underground gym, it would be an accident where an ignorant young man privately set up a taboo altar and caused his death. And with David's death, the source of his sacrificial materials naturally cannot be traced. Following the instructions of Jeremy's trainer, as long as the other party is not given a chance, David's own safety is still guaranteed. Just say your residence has complete security measures, and any unauthorized entry into the smart butler Emma will automatically sound an alarm. This block is also a wealthy area, and at the speed of the police, it will arrive in just 1 minute. This residence itself is a fortress-style building for external defense, and it takes much longer than a minute to forcefully enter. The school will only start in nearly a month, and as long as he pays attention, his safety can be guaranteed. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Ability. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Ability. David thought of the abilities of the Shadow Attendant described in the sacrificial manual. He looked at the Shadow Attendant beside him and didn't seem to be able to participate in battle at all. He stood up and, at the reminder of the smart butler Emma, after finishing his meal, took the Shadow Attendant to the underground fitness room. At this time, the mess in the underground fitness room had already been cleaned up by the intelligent butler Emma. Only the sacrificial manual was placed on the floor of the room, and the rest of the broken debris had already been thrown away. He picked up the sacrificial manual and found the record describing the Shadow Attendant. The Shadow Attendant is a servant of the gods, who bestows powerful assistance to the worshippers, possessing the power of giants and the speed of lightning, and possessing the ability to fly. David read the relevant content lightly, his doubts growing even greater. Shadow Attendant, go pick up that barbell. David instructed, pointing to a 100-kilogram barbell on the ground beside him. The Shadow Attendant's figure drifted past, but the speed was not fast, which did not match the extremely fast speed described in the book. The Shadow Attendant came to the side of the barbell and reached out his blurry arm to grab it. As a result, his arm passed through the barbell, causing a tremor in his arm, but it did not cause the barbell to shake at all. Unable to move even 100 kilograms, where did this powerful force start? David patted the sacrificial manual in his hand in frustration and muttered to himself. From the situation just now, it seems that Shadow Attendant has no combat power at all. His movement speed and strength, coupled with his inability to leave his side for 10 meters, pose a threat to the enemy. He looked at the equipment in the room and found that the barbell was already the lightest. No matter how light the fitness equipment was, it wouldn't have any effect on him, so it wasn't placed here. Shadow Attendant, continue with this book. He looked at the sacrificial manual in his hand and then threw it at Shadow Attendant. The Shadow Attendant obediently reached out to grab the sacrificial manual, but it passed by again. However, this time David saw the sacrificial manual and there was a slight pause. It seems that the Shadow Attendant is not completely powerless, it's just that these things were too heavy just now. He pulled out a strand of hair from his head and waved to the Shadow Attendant, who flew over to his side and stopped. He handed the hair in his hand to the Shadow Attendant, who immediately took it over. This time, the hair was grabbed by the Shadow Attendant's hand and there was no penetration. David's guess is correct. Now we need to know the maximum weight that the Shadow Attendant can support. After several experiments, he calculated that the maximum weight that the Shadow Attendant can hold in his hand is 100 grams. This result greatly disappointed David. Even with a poisonous needle in his hand, it was difficult to pierce the opponent's skin, let alone harm them, even with a force of 100 grams. However, he also discovered a strange situation. When he placed a needle in the hand of the Shadow Attendant, and the Shadow Attendant became invisible, the part held by the Shadow Attendant's hand would also disappear with his invisibility. He asked the Shadow Attendant to cover all the needles with his hands, and the needles disappeared into the air. David did not understand the principle behind it, which may be related to the gods or the unique abilities of the Shadow Attendant. Anyway, his Shadow Attendant is completely different from the one described in the sacrificial manual. The original Shadow Attendant did not have the ability to be invisible, but his Shadow Attendant did. The original Shadow Attendant should have strong combat power, but his Shadow Attendant did not. The result of strengthening oneself that should have occurred during the sacrificial process did not appear on his body. It is unknown whether it was due to the death of his predecessor on the spot. He can clearly know that his strength has not changed compared to before, and although his speed has not been tested, he can still feel that there is no change in his actions. Everything seems to have returned to its original point, with the same physical conditions as its predecessor. Although memories have been regained, the cultural level is still not enough to be admitted to non-university, and the hope of obtaining the non-university first class is still slim. In addition to these, he also discovered an enemy who wanted to kill him, Jeremy Traynor, a much stronger enemy than him. What he now has more than his predecessor are the memories of the previous life and the Shadow Attendants beside him. The memories of the previous life have little effect on him, who is in the Interstellar Federation. This world's technology has long flown out of the planet and entered the era of the universe, much more advanced than the previous world. Only the Shadow Attendant beside him was his hope. Thinking of this, David looked at the Shadow Attendant beside him and recalled the energy that had been transmitted from the Shadow Attendant this morning, allowing him to fully accept the memories of his predecessor. This indicates that the Shadow Attendant must have some other abilities that he was unaware of. He reached out again to contact the Shadow Attendant, wanting to see if there were any further benefits. After reaching out to contact the Shadow Attendant this time, many strange patterns appeared on his semi-transparent body, which shimmered with blue light. The pattern, shimmering with blue light, turned into dots and left Shadow Attendant's semi-transparent body, sinking into David's body. This unknown change surprised David, but he didn't feel any abnormality in his body. The only difference is that his already very close connection with the Shadow Attendant has become even closer, and he can even look at his own body from the Shadow Attendant's eyes. This is an extremely strange feeling. He has two perspectives, one is the human body, and the other is the perspective of the Shadow Attendant. He felt as if he had two bodies at this moment, which made him extremely uncomfortable. He couldn't even control his own body balance and couldn't use ordinary movements flexibly. He carefully controlled his body and sat down, while the Shadow Attendant remained indifferent and hovered in the air, without the need for control. After sitting down, David's body finally had the energy to feel more, and he found some light balls in the Shadow Attendant's body. Because the Shadow Attendant's body is like David's own body, he can clearly perceive the properties of these light balls. Most of these light balls are red, with only one orange. Among them, he saw 5 red light balls belonging to literary attributes. Literature is one of the compulsory subjects in the school. He also saw 4 red light balls belonging to mathematics, 2 red light balls belonging to comprehensive subjects, 2 red light balls belonging to physical arts, and 1 red light ball belonging to heavy axe mastery. Most of the red light balls belong to cultural learning related subjects. Body technique is a body refining method promoted by the Interstellar Federation among ordinary people, consisting of 18 actions. Due to the fact that physical cultivation does not have any side effects and requires extremely low resources, as long as sufficient nutrition is continuously provided, the effectiveness of physical cultivation can be guaranteed, which has become the method for the vast majority of people in the Interstellar Federation to cultivate their bodies. To obtain cultivation methods that exceed physical effects, only a small number of forces such as universities or armies have the conditions to provide them. Heavy axe mastery is one of the basic combat skills in school, as the main enemy of the Interstellar Federation is the Zerg, making heavy weapons the preferred choice. Teaching students basic combat skills in high school is to lay a solid foundation for the selection of top-tier soldiers. Among students who apply for top-tier soldiers, the mastery of basic combat skills is an excellent bonus. In addition, the only orange light ball displays sniping attributes. David is curious about the origin of these light balls, and he is also somewhat dissatisfied with the chaotic display method of the Shadow Attendant. These light balls are too chaotic. As he was thinking, he saw a change in the light balls in the Shadow Attendant's body, with a set of text displayed at the top of each light ball. Literature, 35% entry. Level, literature, 28% entry. Level, literature, 44% entry. Level, literature, 19% entry. Level, literature, 66% entry. Level. Mathematics, 12% beginner, mathematics, 18% beginner, mathematics, 22% beginner, mathematics, 99% beginner. Comprehensive, 40% entry. Level, comprehensive, 29% entry. Level. Body technique, 70% beginner, body technique, 20% beginner. Heavy axe mastery, 33% beginner. Sniper, 20% proficient. At this point, he finally understood that the red light ball represented an entry. Level, orange represented a mature level, and the depth of the color represented mastery in the same level. The Shadow Attendant was something he had just received, and the only thing he experienced was the explosion and impact in the bookstore. David judged in his heart that these light balls representing various abilities were obtained from the bookstore. From the attributes represented by these light spheres, they should all be the ability to inhale from those who died at the explosion site. David remembered that at the moment of the explosion, he felt the Shadow Attendant lose control for a short period of time after being knocked away. It seems that at that time, the Shadow Attendant rushed out to absorb these. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Improvement. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Enhancement. Since Shadow Attendant can display these light balls in a way that David can understand, can Shadow Attendant also demonstrate David's own abilities? Anyway, he is also a senior high school student, at least possessing knowledge of literature, mathematics, and synthesis. Shadow Attendant, can I also display my situation in this way? David thought of it and did it. He asked Shadow Attendant about it. The Shadow Attendant's eyes lit up a few times, and then David saw a set of data in front of him. This technology was somewhat similar to the projection imaging of the Interstellar Federation, but he did not see any data display in front of his body through the Shadow Attendant's eyes. David is not a scientist, and after thinking about it, he didn't understand the principle of this display method. He focused his attention on the data in front of him. Name: David Kerr. Strength 2.5, 1, Agility 1.7, 1, Physical Fitness 2, 1, Spirit 2.8, 1, Literature, Beginner's Level, Mathematics, Beginner's Level, History, Beginner's Level, Physical Arts, 10% Beginner's Level, Long Sword Mastery, 5% Beginner's Level. David's strength is 2.5, while as a reference standard, the average person's strength is 200 kilograms, which is data 1. Every 1 point increase in strength is twice the previous strength. David's body has not suffered much since childhood, especially when it comes to foods that are beneficial to the body, and fortified meat has never been cut off much. This also resulted in his strength being 3 times that of an ordinary person, with a force of up to 600 kilograms placed in his past life, making him the absolute number 1 in the world. You should know that the professional weightlifters in his past life could only lift a maximum weight of 250 kilograms, which is a huge gap from his 600 kilograms. Agility is 1.7, and if David has a good memory, his recent test result was 9.2 seconds per 100 meters. Usain Bolt, a former Jamaican sprinter, achieved a time of 9.58 seconds, which was already the best result after countless generations of hard work in his previous life. But in this life, as an ordinary senior high school student, he surpassed the speed of the world's first flying person in his previous life. Of course, both strength and agility require a strong physique as the foundation, and a physique twice that of an ordinary person is also normal. However, he is not very familiar with the concept of spirit, and his spiritual power surpassing that of an ordinary person is the strongest of his 4 basic attributes. Spiritually invisible and intangible, but upon closer reflection, the world he saw after waking up from sleep became clearer than before, which should be the result of spiritual enhancement. In fact, what David didn't know was that the biggest reason why the Shadow Attendant had not been able to show so much ability before was because his spirit was too weak. David's predecessor consumed most of the energy in his soul during the sacrifice, and the remaining weak soul was absorbed by the summoned Shadow Attendant with memories. The summoned Shadow Attendant is even more special, and the sacrificial process requires reaching out to the designated deity. However, David's predecessor had very little knowledge of the deities in the divine world, and the Jeremy trainer who provided him with the sacrificial manual was even less likely to tell him this. Therefore, the deity being sacrificed this time is an unknown existence. The sacrificial method recorded in the sacrificial book from the divine world is not a simple way to enhance one's strength, and even in the divine world, few people will try to make such sacrifices. Every person who sacrifices has undergone a long period of special training, as well as a large amount of precious soul potions, and the sacrificial person themselves has corresponding talents, all of which are combined to carry out this sacrificial activity in the temple. Even so, its success rate is extremely low. However, David's predecessor knew nothing about it, and without the protection of a temple, he had a strong talent in the realm of souls, and without corresponding resources and training, he conducted such a risky sacrifice outside the divine world. The consequences can be imagined and understood. It was during the sacrifice that, under the influence of unknown forces, David's soul crossed into this body imperfectly fused. But after the influence of time travel and the consumption of sacrifice, David's soul power has become extremely weak. This makes his spirit unable to reach the level of an ordinary person, let alone activate the special abilities of the Shadow Attendant. After experiencing the explosion in the bookstore, nearly 100 deaths resulted in nearly 100 souls, some weak and some strong. Although some of the souls absorbed by the Shadow Attendant were strengthened by the Shadow Attendant himself, there were still many transformed soul powers passed on to David. It was precisely with sufficient soul support that David was able to quickly retrieve all his memories, and the Shadow Attendant activated corresponding abilities, which were also related to his mental strength. When David saw the abilities he had mastered below the data, his face couldn't help but blush. This was a shame for his predecessor. He inherited the memories of his predecessor and naturally felt ashamed of himself. Looking at these results, the 3 main cultural disciplines of literature, mathematics, and synthesis all show that they are not yet beginners. And his self-satisfied physical skills are only 10% of the beginner's progress, let alone the 5% beginner's progress mastered by the long sword. These grades reflect his current true level, which is just a scumbag. It's just a dream to still want to get into non-university. Of course, David was also somewhat self-deprecating at this time. The entry-level grades were above the average level, and most of the students' grades were at an entry-level in the evaluation criteria of the Shadow Service. The 14 red light balls absorbed by the Shadow Attendant were obtained from the souls of nearly 100 people, and even ordinary people have their own strengths. David ordered the Shadow Attendant to send a literary, 19% beginner, red light ball into his body, which was the way he could guess the application of the red light ball. Because he found that under his command, the light balls inside the Shadow Attendant's body could move. The reason for choosing this red light sphere is because there are the most literary red light spheres, and if this literary, 19% beginner, red light sphere fails the experiment, it will not be a significant loss. And once successful, there is hope for non-university, which my predecessor had always wanted to get into. If he can get into non-university, then Jeremy's trainer and other potential enemies will no longer be able to threaten him. You should know that non-city is not the parent city where he is located, and non-university is not something that ordinary people can enter, let alone how it would be for him to enter it. As for the safety in half a year, as long as he is more careful and doesn't give Jeremy's trainer a chance, he can probably avoid it. At present, the only thing he can do about danger is to be prepared, and he is unable to make a counterattack at all. Perhaps the possibility of a counterattack lies with the Shadow Attendant. David looked at the Shadow Attendant and made up his mind. The Shadow Attendant also transferred the red light ball of literature, 19% beginner level, from his body to his body. Just as the red light ball entered his body in literature, 19% beginner, he saw a change in the data panel in front of him. Previously, literature, not yet beginner, became literature, 19% beginner, and at the same time, a memory emerged in his mind. That is a learning process that involves reading aloud, reciting softly, understanding silently, and being explained by the teacher. There is no image of the memory owner in these memories, and even the faces of the several teachers who appeared are blurry. I don't know how long it has been, but David woke up from his memories. His understanding of the subject of literature has greatly deepened in his mind. He remembers every sentence and knowledge point he just remembered. He looked at the identity bracelet and realized that only a minute had passed. In his feeling, it felt like he had gone through hundreds of days of learning. This red ball of light gave him knowledge, as if engraved in his mind, which left a deeper impression than the knowledge he had learned himself. The knowledge learned by oneself will gradually be forgotten over time, but the knowledge obtained through the red light ball will not disappear. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Waste. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Waste. Looking at the literature, 19% beginner, on the data panel in front of him, he impatiently ordered the Shadow Attendant to send literature, 66% beginner, into his body. This is the best literary light ball. If all three literary light balls are added together, he can break through the entry-level literature. He wants to know what kind of mature literature is after breaking through the entry-level. Literature, 66% beginner, entered his body, and his gaze was constantly fixed on literature, 19% beginner, on the attribute panel, and soon 19% continued to increase. But when it reached 69%, the progress no longer increased. So it's not additive. David couldn't help but shake his head and mutter to himself. He greedily believes that the same ability brought to him by these light balls can be added up, but in fact, it is not. This is also easy to understand. There is a significant overlap in the knowledge learned in literature between the person who has reached 66% of the beginner's level in literature and the person who has reached 19% of the beginner's level in literature. 19% of entry-level literature has only 3% of non-overlapping knowledge, and David speculates that as he integrates more and more light spheres, this overlapping knowledge will also increase. Afterwards, the same amount of memories flooded in, including attending classes, studying, self-study, and reviewing. However, this time the owner of the memories clearly had to work harder. After regaining consciousness, he ordered the Shadow Attendant to once again send a piece of literature, 28% entry-level, into his body. This time, there was an accident. After the red ball of light entered his body, he felt dizzy and then passed out. After a long time, David woke up from his coma and looked at the time on his identity bracelet. He had been unconscious for half an hour. This time, He did not gain any memory and nervously asked the Shadow Attendant to activate his attribute panel. Among them, literature, 69% beginner level, is still there, without any changes. He looked inside the Shadow Attendant again, and the red light ball of literature, 28% beginner level, had indeed disappeared. David understood that he was wasting a red ball of light, which was 28% of the introductory literary knowledge. If he were to study on his own, even if he spent a whole year studying literature, he might not be able to achieve this 28% of the introductory literary knowledge. He is well aware of his level, neither his predecessor nor his current self is a genius. If the predecessor was a genius with the condition of constantly consuming fortified meat, it would only increase the strength to 600 kilograms, let alone use the opportunity of life struggle to enhance one's own strength through sacrifice. If David were a genius himself, he wouldn't have lived in a fourth-tier city in his past life. He had already gone to those big cities to join big companies and strive for a better future. So he felt extremely heartbroken for wasting a red light ball of literature, 28% beginner level. Fortunately, these are just the knowledge spheres of literature, not the most precious ones. He made a decision in his heart that he must master the laws of the light sphere before using the light spheres of literature and mathematics. He also gave these light balls a name, called the knowledge light ball. The opportunity to die nearly 100 people at once is not a common occurrence, and in David's memory, it is rare for so many people to die at once in the city of Perrin. And when someone dies, David cannot appear in time and uses Shadow Attendant to absorb souls. So the current knowledge sphere is that he can obtain all the knowledge spheres in a short period of time, and he cannot actively kill for the sake of the knowledge sphere. Whether he has the ability or not, his psychology does not allow him to do so. Afterwards, he did not use the knowledge light ball. The waste of the previous knowledge light ball made him speculate that for a period of time, in his state, he could only merge two knowledge light balls. He stood up and performed the 18 body techniques he had memorized. Although his predecessor was extremely proficient in the 18 body techniques, even the Shadow Attendant's evaluation reached 10% beginner level. But this was still his first time practicing the 18 postures of physical education. Although the movements were standard, it took him over an hour. However, during this practice of the 18 postures, David felt that there was a significant difference from what he remembered. He is now sweating profusely all over his body, and every muscle seems to be beating, which is surprisingly effective. You should know that in memory, every time my predecessor practiced the 18 postures of physical exercises, he only felt a slight fatigue in his body. He couldn't help but think about whether his physical skills had improved, and then he ordered the Shadow Attendant to activate the attribute panel. Sure enough, he saw that the body art, 10% beginner, on the attribute panel had changed to body art, 20% beginner, and his practice this time was surprisingly better than the previous 10 years. He felt a strange feeling in his heart. You know, he didn't dare to merge those two body art knowledge light balls. In this situation, his physical skills have greatly improved. What is the reason for this? David's gaze moved on the attribute panel, and finally he fixed his gaze on spirit. 2.8.1. Of all his attributes, only this one should have undergone an unknown change. He strongly suspected that the Shadow Attendant had absorbed the soul of the deceased and enhanced his spirit. Especially his sudden progress is more like something that a genius can achieve, and the source of genius may be spiritual enhancement. Of course, regarding whether the Shadow Attendant absorbs souls to enhance his spirit, it will need to be discovered in the future when there is a chance for the Shadow Attendant to absorb new souls. David, who was extremely agitated, couldn't help but look at the only orange knowledge ball in the Shadow Attendant's body when he closed the attribute panel, the sniper, 20% proficient, knowledge ball. He stabilizes his mind and doesn't know where this sniper, 20% proficient, knowledge ball comes from, but he knows this is his only chance to become a sniper warrior, and he can't waste this sniper, 20% proficient, knowledge ball. David didn't understand how there could be someone among a group of star chasers who could practice sniping to 20% proficiency. Such an existence must be a warrior, or a rare species of sniper warrior among the warriors. But soon he thought of another possibility, that the person in the bookstore died because of the scattered flying shuttle fragments on the ground. This sniper warrior is highly likely to be the one in the flying shuttle. All the people who died in the bookstore were caused by this sniper warrior, and David himself almost died in the explosion. David breathed a sigh of relief as he disconnected from the Shadow Attendant before standing up. Currently, he was unable to control both the Shadow Attendant and his own body. He patted the dust on his body, which was his habitual action, but this residence was managed by Emma's intelligent management, so how could there be dust on the ground? Suddenly, he stopped his movements because he caught a picture of his pocket, where he had forgotten an item. David took out the metal cylinder, feeling regretful that he didn't hand it over when he saw the police. At that time, his mind was stunned by the scene of corpses lying on the ground, and he wouldn't have thought of this. And now if he hands in this metal cylinder again, he will have trouble. He obtained it illegally and it is likely to have an impact on his college entrance examination. Anyway, no one saw it, no one said anything about it. Holding the metal cylinder in his hand, David immediately made a decision in his heart. The question is, what exactly is this metal cylinder? He had never seen this item in his memory, and it looked somewhat like a small monocular telescope. He placed the metal cylinder in front of his right eye, and then in his right eye he saw a completely different basement. A set of data in the right eye is displayed on the left side. Wind speed. 0, wind direction. 0, temperature. 25 degrees, humidity. 42%. And when his eyes focus on any position inside the room, distance data will appear in front of his right eye. Below these, there is a line of text reminding that no main sniper weapon has been found, no exoskeleton armor has been found, and the T3 sniper assist device is not working. David finally knew the name of this thing, and since he knew the name, it would be easy to handle. He opened the identity bracelet and connected it to the civilian Skynet. Due to cost and other issues, the parent civil Sky network can only connect all information within the planet and cannot connect to further planets, but this is sufficient for David. He entered T3 Sniper Assist Device in the search and soon hundreds of related information appeared. He opened up these pieces of information and looked at them one by one. Most of them mentioned the T3 Sniper Assist Device, but there were few detailed descriptions. However, when he opened a page called Sniper Enthusiast, he saw some practical information about the T3 Sniper Assistive Device. The T3 Sniper Assistive Device is a military sniper assistive device, which comes second in price and is not sold to the public at all. According to sniper enthusiasts, the T3 Sniper Assistive Device can increase the combat power of sniper armor by 30%, and is also a powerful device that only a few elite sniper armor soldiers can possess in the military. David's heart was filled with excitement. The T3 Sniper Assistive Device was useless to ordinary people, but as long as he thought of the orange GG light ball that sniped, 20% proficient, he knew that the T3 Sniper Assistive Device would greatly enhance his abilities. End of this chapter. 10, Chapter 10. Relatives. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Relatives. After playing with the T3 Sniper Assistive Device for a while, David put it away and dragged his tired body to the bathroom. As soon as he returned, he regained his memory, and with the discovery of the Shadow Attendant secret, he didn't have time to clean up the stains on his body. After experiencing the explosion, he was already in a state of embarrassment, and water rushed down from his head, reducing his fatigue significantly. After cleaning, he checked the wound on his body and found that the wound on his back had almost healed in a day, and there were only some scabs left from the burn on his hand. This body is several times stronger than his previous life, and this minor injury would not have healed in a week in his previous life. However, in this world, the same injury only takes a few hours to heal for the most part. Emma, prepare me a dinner and add an extra fortified meat. David changed into clean clothes and felt the hunger in his stomach, loudly instructing the smart butler, love code. At this moment, he also recalled memories related to the intelligent butler Emma, whose name and voice were all derived from an extremely famous female star, who was also the favorite female star of her predecessor. David couldn't help but feel disdainful for his predecessor who applied the voice and name of actress Emma to the smart butler and spent a considerable credit point to obtain the right to use it. I guess this is the attribute of otaku, whether it's in his past life or here, it's the same. Normally, David only eats fortified meat once a day, which is a supplement based on his body's needs. However, today after practicing the 18 postures of body art, he clearly felt that his body needs a lot of energy. If it were ordinary food, the effect would be very poor, and it could even affect his cultivation tomorrow. Master, your credit balance is only 1320 points, which is not enough to order next month's fortified meat. Smart butler Emma reminded David while dining. David only then remembered that due to his predecessor's crazy purchase of the materials needed for the sacrifice, he had invested all his wealth in it. Flipping through memories in his mind, he quickly let go of his worries. Because his income was not high, his mother Kathy had already prepared for his future life before committing suicide. In the other cities, he also had 2 commercial properties that were managed by an agency, and he could receive a monthly income of 20,000 credit points. However, his predecessor did not care about the issues with these 2 properties, nor did he have any memory of where they were located. However, based solely on the income of 20,000 credit points, it can be imagined that those 2 properties must be extremely important. For most ordinary people with a monthly income of only 3,000 credit points, 20,000 credit points is already a considerable wealth. So in terms of living expenses, he doesn't have to worry at all, let alone that although he doesn't want to, Hans still transfers 2,000 credit points of living expenses to his ID card every month. Although his credit score is not high at this time, it only affects a few days at the beginning of next month. After the agent company transfers the rent, he can resume normal usage. Ding dong, ding dong. The electronic doorbell rang. David stopped Emma, the intelligent housekeeper, from opening the door. At the same time, he complained in his heart that Emma, the intelligent housekeeper, was unreliable. You should know that he was the only one living here at this late hour. How could he open the door to anyone? He put down the knife in his hand, opened the identity bracelet, and retrieved the image of the entrance to the residence. His identity bracelet manages all the security systems of the residence. In the image, he saw a skinny middle-aged man dressed in federal-style government uniform. On the chest of the official uniform, a golden badge emitted a faint light. David immediately recognized the middle-aged man, who was his physical father Hans Kerr, and what was pinned to his chest was the coat of arms. At this point, David also understood why the smart butler Emma was directly preparing to open the door without asking for his opinion. As Hans was his guardian, there was no need for his consent to enter the residence. And Hans was able to ring the doorbell, which showed great respect for David's attitude. David was not at all prepared to meet Hans, but he still stood up and walked to the door to open it. Unlike seeing Hans through images, David had many memories in his mind when he saw the middle-aged man in front of him. These memories include the time when David's predecessor was with his father, and his predecessor also had beautiful memories of his father. At that time, Hans returned from the battlefield, always bringing gifts to his predecessor and playing with him. These memories of his father merged with David's own memories of his father in another world, suppressing all the dissatisfaction of his predecessor with his father. Father! David couldn't help but shout as soon as he saw Hans. Hans seemed surprised, but immediately a pleased smile appeared on his face. David hadn't called him that in many years. After Kathy's death, David even regarded him as an enemy. In Hans's view, this is David's reaction after experiencing life and death, whether David is still a child. David, I know about the accident you had this morning. It's really dangerous. Is your injury okay? Hans paused for a while before remembering today's purpose and said with concern. Although he learned from his subordinates that David had not had an accident and his injuries were minor, he was still worried when he heard the news. But at that time, he tried to contact the smart butler Emma and learned that David was resting, so he didn't immediately come to visit David. After learning from the smart butler Emma that David had time, he rushed over. "Father, my injury is fine, please come in." David didn't know how to get along with Hans, so he stepped aside and whispered softly. His gaze then caught sight of a suspended flying car parked on the roadside, as well as two faint figures, one large and one small, on the car. "David, Aunt Bertha is a bit uneasy, and Eddie wants to come and take a look too, so I brought them over," Hans quickly explained when he saw David's line of sight. Bertha is David's stepmother, while Eddie is the 3-year-old son born to Bertha after marrying Hans. "Father, let auntie and brother come in too." David was not unhappy. He accepted the memories of his predecessor, but his emotions were still his own. He had his own way of dealing with his family. Father Hans is only under 50 years old, which is still very young compared to the average age of 200 years in the Interstellar Federation. David also knew that Hans was not easy. Hans was a warrior trained by the army. After joining the army, Hans was discovered by the army and underwent rigorous training. The rules of the army left Hans with no time to go home frequently, which prevented him from spending long periods of time with his wife Kathy. Especially after Hans went to War Star to participate in the war, it made Kathy worried about getting sick. Whoever is right or wrong between Hans and Kathy, or in other words, right or wrong, is no longer important to David. He is now just replacing his predecessor to treat Hans well and his loved ones in this life. "Okay, I'll go call them." Hans was surprised by David's attitude, and his face was also excited. He turned around and walked towards the floating car as he spoke. David looked at Hans's shaky figure and felt even more moved. He knew the strength of the armor, but now Hans has long lost his strong physique. Although his left arm and left leg are the best prosthetics, they can only be used without affecting his normal life. Hans used to be a sniper armor, a special presence among armor warriors. It was precisely because he lost the ability of armor warriors, coupled with his limited ability to interact with others, that he stayed in Perrin City after receiving the title of National Warrior. "Brother." Little Edie ran towards David with her short legs, shouting as she ran. Although David's predecessor had great resistance to his Aunt Bertha, he was very fond of his younger brother Eddie and would occasionally buy things to visit him in kindergarten. From my memory, my younger brother Eddie may have been the person my predecessor wanted to get close to the most in the world. When I was with little Eddie, my predecessor had no worries and completely opened up his mind. "Eddie." He smiled and opened his arms to pick up little Eddie, then greeted Bertha who followed behind, "Hello Auntie." Bertha was also surprised by David's attitude, but she just smiled back immediately after being taken aback. End of this chapter.